Google Chrome at this point is spyware. I don't think I'm being controversial or spicy by saying that. It literally spies on everything you do in the browser. That's how they generate the vast amounts of data that is key to their business model.
I remember in the early 2000s, Firefox was so cool. I remember just feeling like a total badass, oh, look, this school computer doesn't have Firefox installed. Let me take care of that shit. Download Firefox and install it. It's yeah, I just made this computer better.
Welcome to the Sovereign Computing Show, presented by ATL BitLab. I'm Jordan Bravo, and this is a podcast where we teach you how to take back control of your devices. Sovereign computing means you own your technology, not the other way around.
This episode is sponsored by ATL BitLab. ATL BitLab is Atlanta's Freedom Tech hackerspace. We have co-working desks, conference rooms, event space, maker tools, and tons of coffee. There is a very active community here in the lab. Every Wednesday night is Bitcoin night here in Atlanta. We also have meetups for cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, decentralized identity, product design, and more. We offer day passes and nomad passes for people who need to use the lab only occasionally, as well as memberships for people who plan to use the lab more regularly, such as myself. One of the best things about having a BitLab membership isn't the amenities, it's the people. Surrounding yourself with a community helps you learn faster and helps you build better. Your creativity becomes amplified when you work in this space. That's what I think, at least. If you're interested in becoming a member or supporting the space, please visit us at atlbitlab.com. That's atlbitlab.com. All right, on to our show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Sovereign Computing Show. I'm Jordan Bravo, and I'm here today with Steven DeLorme.
Sup?
First, we want to remind everyone that you can boost into the show and let us know your opinions, what you want to hear as far as topics go. As a reminder, you do not need to be listening live. You can boost into any pre-recorded podcast episode, no matter how old it is. You just use a podcast 2.0 capable app such as Fountain.fm, and you can go ahead and choose which episode you're listening to. It will select that one and boost into that specific episode, and we will get your message and we'll read it on the show. Coming up today, on today's episode, we are going to talk about web browsers and search engines and how you can choose the most private options and customize them for even more privacy. But first, we're going to talk about today our news article that we want to analyze and share with everyone. And that is about, this is an ongoing saga that's currently unfurling about Apple's battle with the UK government. The UK government recently ordered Apple to remove end-to-end encryption in their iCloud accounts for UK users. And it looks like Apple has now had to comply with that. So let's talk about what that means for everyone, including people who don't live in the UK and are using Apple devices like iPhones. Let's take a look first at, Steven, do we have the No BS Bitcoin article?
Yeah, let me get to that one real quick. Apple pulls end-to-end encryption, iCloud encryption. Apple pulls end-to-end iCloud encryption in the UK, boots 135,000 plus non-compliant apps from the EU App Store.
All right. So Apple has, let's scroll down a little bit.
You blow that up a little bit.
For those of you just listening, we're going to read this out loud so you don't have to worry. Apple has removed its Advanced Data Protection ADP tool for new customers in the UK after the government demanded backdoor access to encrypted user data. ADP is an opt-in feature used for protecting sensitive user data, such as iCloud files, photos, notes, and other stuff. And Apple expressed disappointment, blah, blah, blah. That's pretty much the gist of it. We already covered that. But let's take a look at the implications of that. There's a Forbes article that I want
Yeah.
to share with everybody. And this shows something really telling. And this article talked about how a few weeks or months ago, I believe, the FBI and other U.S. agencies, they were actually recommending end-to-end encrypted apps for U.S. citizens and tech users because Chinese hackers had hacked into the U.S. telecom infrastructure. And so we had commented on that article saying, wow, it's interesting to see the U.S. three-letter agencies who previously were anti-end-to-end encryption because it inhibited them to be able to spy and gather user data. They were now recommending end-to-end encryption. But it turns out they weren't really recommending it 100%. They wanted, if you look at this article, they were kind of caveating it with, well, we want end-to-end encryption, sure, that keeps out the Chinese hackers, but we still want to be able to read user data if we demand it from a US company. So in other words, they want end-to-end encryption with a backdoor, which, as we've talked about before, is not real end-to-end encryption. Either it keeps out everybody except the intended recipients, or it doesn't, and it has a backdoor that third parties can use. And I'm going to read a quote here from the FBI that says, "Law enforcement supports strong, responsibly managed encryption. This encryption should be designed to protect people's privacy and also managed so that U.S. tech companies can provide readable content in response to a lawful court order." End quote. And let's scroll down a little bit more, Stephen. There's a particular quote I want to read that's really telling, and it's about how they want it both ways. In other words,
Is it this one? The FBI's formal position is that it is a strong advocate for the wide and consistent use of responsibly managed encryption that providers can decrypt and provide to law enforcement when served with a legal order.
yeah, that's right. And let's see, it's just either above or below these paragraphs, but they essentially are saying they want it both ways, right? They're saying,
Oh, yeah. It's the challenge is that while the Bureau says it does not want encryption to be weakened or compromised so that it can be defeated by malicious actors, it does want providers who manage encrypted data to be able to decrypt the data and provide to law enforcement only in response to U.S. legal process.
right. So it's saying in the same sentence, it doesn't want encryption to be weakened or compromised, but it does want to be able to break through the encryption via a backdoor when it's an order by U.S. law enforcement. So in other words, they
Yeah.
are just talking out of both sides of their mouth. So
Yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, it kind of says it all. I don't know if I have anything else to add here. It's just that the U.S. government agencies are better at acting like they care maybe than, let's say, Chinese hackers who really don't interface. They don't have like a public PR department. So we can say, oh, Chinese hackers bad. They want to break in. FBI and CIA, NSA, good. They're the good guys. But really, they want to be able to continue to backdoor us because we know that they've been spying on their own citizens for years now. So I don't know. To me, this is just political speak, double talk. And all it says to me is that we need to continue to, us as users, we need to continue to make the choice of using end-to-end encrypted communications and end-to-end encrypted storage and not put our trust in any one company such as Apple, because even if they have the best of intentions, they can be compelled to by any government where they are in that jurisdiction, right? Because a legal entity has to be responsible. They have to comply with the government of whatever jurisdiction they're in, or they'll simply be shut down. They don't really have a choice there. No matter how principled they are, no matter how many billboards of sexy Apple privacy ads they run, right? They have to eventually, at the end of the day, comply.
Yeah. And I think, one quick point is that, it is interesting because like just a couple of weeks ago, we were reading an article saying FBI is recommending you use end-to-end encrypted apps like Signal because, Chinese threat actors could compromise companies and read sensitive messages. And then now it sounds like you're saying, well, we want encryption, but only encryption that the tech companies can decrypt if we ask them to. Sounds like a contradiction. But I think one thing we've learned just, especially recently with everything going on in the news with Doge and all of that, is that like governments are not just these like, monolithic organizations. It's not like one brain that has like one opinion and one viewpoint. It's composed of, people, and people are, flawed and imperfect, and we all have our own opinions about things. And so like, I don't know how public statements get issued from the FBI, but it very well could be that the statement we were reading a couple of weeks ago was from, one branch of the Bureau, and this is coming from another branch of the Bureau, right? Like, I think that, just depending on who you ask in the government, you're probably going to get a different answer about something. But yeah, I mean, I'll just, for anyone who might be listening, who might be new to these topics of, sovereign computing and end-to-end encryption, this kind of language sounds very mature and responsible when you just like are reading it on paper. It's like, of course, we want responsibly managed encryption. We want to keep the bad guys out, but we do want to be able to let the good guys in, if we need to. And that does sound like a very, responsible viewpoint, but it's that when you dig into it, it doesn't make sense. It's, I think, you have a situation where any kind of flaw or weakness in the encryption that, can be exploited by a good guy can also be exploited by a bad guy. In other words, it's like, if you want to protect your data by having it end-to-end encrypted, except there is a good guy that you trust to be able to access that data without your consent, whether that is the government or whether that's Apple or some other good guy, pick your good guy. Even if you trust them to be always good, if they get hacked, if they get compromised, if they get attacked, then the bad guy has compromised you as well. So weakening end-to-end encryption, in my view, is not a good thing to do. And, dressing it up in this language of, well, this is mature and responsibly managed and encryption, it doesn't, it doesn't actually work in practice, I don't think.
Agreed. And it's worth pointing out that they put the typical boogeymen in this article. There's a quote from the FBI. It wouldn't be a quote from the FBI about encryption if they didn't mention terrorists, hackers, and child predators. So they can always, I think, play on people's fears by invoking these really bad people that none of us want, being able to commit crimes. But it's that fear of those people that the FBI and others are using to say, if you don't want these people doing bad things, you got to let us weaken the encryption and have a backdoor so that we can surveil everything. So just wanted to throw that out there. It's a kind of obligatory statements from them.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, it's like that everyone's going to have their own interpretation of these kinds of things. I think one way to interpret all this stuff is like oh yeah, they're all evil and all of that, and governments want to control everything. I think another maybe perhaps more charitable interpretation is that I think when you look at any agency or division of the government or whatever, they are given a mission. Like it's people's livelihoods to carry out a particular mission, right? So like if you are in, let's say, the military, especially if you're a high up military leader, your mandate, being in charge of that like part of government, is to be able to win wars. Like that's your job, and you're going to want to have every resource at your disposal to be able to win wars because that's your job. So pick your department of government, figure out what they do. If you're going to do your job well, that's like you want every resource at your disposal. Same thing with FBI. They're tasked with tracking down all of these types of criminals. And, it's certainly from a job perspective, logical that you want every resource at your disposal to be able to do your job well. And certainly if you could just spy on everybody's communications all the time, that would actually make your job way easier to do. So in that respect, it makes sense why someone in that division of government might hold that opinion. Nonetheless, that's not the world I want to live in, where every citizen has to get spied on. So it's our responsibility to push back against that, I think, and build technology that allows us to protect our privacy and sovereignty. But I think there's may always be this kind of struggle, that somebody else will always want the tools to do their job better. So.
That's right. It's a matter of people and organizations made of those people responding to incentives. And before we move on from this topic, there is one other angle that I think is really interesting. And that is, I think towards the end of the article that they start to get into this more, but that's the idea that this is just the first move in a opening salvo, you might say, or a series of changes that we might see going on. So coming up, we now might see the US government pressure Apple to do the same thing. And then it could also pressure other companies to do the same thing. So you have things like Meta, which owns WhatsApp, which uses end-to-end encryption, and Microsoft is another big one, and Google, of course. So all of these companies that have really popular apps, it's highly likely, or at least probable, that going forward after this is sort of a precedent being set on the world stage. And now the US government might attempt to pressure companies to reverse their encryption as well. Okay. With that, let's move into our main topic of today. We're going to be talking about web browsers and search engines. There's a wide variety of browsers to choose from, both for desktop and mobile. And let's concentrate on desktop first, because I think there's more choices there and more to talk about. So I think first, let's talk about what our goal is. Our goal is to have a balance between convenience and privacy. Obviously, I'm going to be leaning pretty hard on the privacy end of the spectrum. I'm willing to give up a little bit of convenience for some privacy, but at the same time, I'm not going all the way to one side where some people might use the Tor browser for everything. I think that's not practical. I think for anybody who's using the internet on a regular basis and relies on it, Tor is just too slow and too unreliable. So we're going to be looking at normal HTTPS capable browsers and kind of everyday use browsers. First, I want to talk about what browsers not to use, because this is a shorter list. And we're going to talk about the granddaddy of them all, which is Chrome. Google Chrome is by far the most popular browser. It's not even close. I think they have maybe 90+% of the browser market. And it's important to, we're going to take a little trip down software education lane for a second. Chrome is actually built on an open source browser called Chromium, also made by Google. And then Chrome is just Chromium with some extra Google proprietary stuff baked in to make it have a slightly smoother UX, but also tightly integrated with Google's ad ecosystem in terms of your account, your Google account and data collection and the Google search engine. It's highly optimized to be incredibly fast, and that's just great business on their part, because the better the UX, the more people that use it, and that means the more data that they're able to collect. Google Chrome at this point is spyware. I don't think I'm being controversial or spicy by saying that. It literally spies on everything you do in the browser. That's how they generate the vast amounts of data that is key to their business model. So it's also important to understand that there are a lot of browsers out there that you might encounter that might seem different, but are actually just built on top of Chromium. There are actually only 3 unique browsers out there. There's Chromium, Firefox, and Safari, and each with their own engines in them. So Google Chrome and Chromium has the Blink rendering engine with the V8 JavaScript engine. And then Firefox has the, do you remember what it's called?
Gecko, I think is what it's called. I think it's Gecko.
Thank you. Firefox is the Gecko rendering engine and the SpiderMonkey JavaScript engine. And then Safari has the WebKit rendering engine, I believe it's called, and the JavaScript core JavaScript engine. And so every browser out there is built on one of those 3 browsers. It's basically just fancy skins and some added functionality on top of those primary browser baselines. So,
and a funny thing on that note is, I know you said you wanted to focus on desktop, but I'm pretty sure on iOS that all the browsers are WebKit. It's weird because you got to think it's like even the Firefox and the Chrome browsers are actually running on WebKit on iPhone.
Yeah. So we'll get to this in a little bit, but iPhone users are incredibly limited on their browser choices, but and for that major reason, which is that Apple does not allow browsers on iOS that are anything other than just reskins of Safari. So going back to the desktop, we don't want to use Chrome because Chrome is just the highly Google tuned version of Chromium. What about Microsoft Edge? Edge is Microsoft's version of Chromium, and it's basically just Chromium with Microsoft stuff on top. So in many ways, it is a worse version of Chrome. It's got Google's spyware built into it and Google's data collection, as well as Microsoft's data collection on top of it. And from what I've been able to gather, it's no faster and it doesn't provide any extra features. I think it's just a Microsoft branding thing. That's really the only advantage you get. So if you're a big fan of Microsoft branding, maybe you want to go with Edge, but I wouldn't recommend it. So we talked about what browsers not to use. Let's talk about what we actually do want to use. The first browser I'm going to recommend is actually a Chromium fork. It's built on top of Chromium. So you're going to get a lot of the speed that you would expect from Chromium and good user experience. And this is Brave. Many of you probably use Brave already, but if you haven't heard of it, it's simply Chromium with built-in ad block. Now, the downside is that it comes with a lot of Brave branded shitcoin stuff, and it's very crypto focused. And if you're not interested in that, it's very easy to disable it. But just be aware that out of the box, you are going to see buttons and settings that give you easy access to Web3 crypto stuff. And Brave has a token, the BAT token, BAT, Basic Attention Token. And they had this cool idea of how to pay you if we're looking at online ads, and then you could trade that token. But really, it would have been more interesting if they had just used Satoshis, the internet money that we all know and love. But in any case, you don't have to. I use Brave a lot. I just go into the settings and disable the Web3 stuff, and it's a great browser. It feels very similar to Chrome, so no huge surprises there. They do have. I want to give a shout out that Brave has a great search engine. It's search.brave.com, and it's the default one that Brave is going to use when you install it. But you can use this search engine on any browser. It's not limited to Brave. So you can use this on Firefox, Chrome, etc. But I find it to be, it uses a completely different search algorithm and index than Google or any of the other major providers. So it's not like just a reskinning of it. You're actually getting unique search results. I find the search results to be pretty good. And on top of that, Brave has a little AI blurb at the top of the search results page. So Steven's going to do a sample search for the Sovereign Computing Show. And above the search results, it's a quick little blurb that says, the Sovereign Computing Show. There is no specific show called the Sovereign Computing Show.
Oh, here we go. Oh, there's
this
no
is- this
specific
is
mention
cool.
of the Sovereign Computing Show in the context provided. Well, that just means we need to work on the SEO of the podcast page a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of Brave search in action.
Yeah.
Any comments on Brave?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo everything you said. I mean, it's like I think what they were trying to do was kind of noble with their token thing. Not that I would agree with making tokens, but just from them trying to be like, okay, we're going to make a browser that cuts out advertising. Like, how does the web economy, like the website, web content economy work in a world where all ads are blocked? And I disagree with their answer that they came up with, but I do agree with them asking the question to begin with. That yeah, it is an interesting kind of problem if you do advocate for ad blocking, how you incentivize websites to publish and host great content that you want to see. And I suspect the answer would probably have to do more with Bitcoin and Bitcoin micropayments and all of that. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole other topic.
There is one thing I'd like to give credit to Brave for, which is they have a built-in Tor functionality in their browser.
Yes.
So if you were to go to a website that has a Tor onion address, it will actually load in Brave, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and they'll give you like a little icon up at the top. I was trying to find an example of one. Oh, actually, does their search page not have it? Yeah, their search page has it. So you can click on the onion here. And yeah, it's really nice to see a browser that has Tor integrated as a first-class citizen. I'm actually opening it in a Tor browser, but you probably can't stay on the screen share because I opened it up in a new window. But that is pretty cool. Usually people have to download, historically you had to download a whole nother browser for Tor. So it's nice to have another one just that it has it built in and, with the same ease that you would make an incognito window, you can make a Tor window. So that's really cool.
All right. Next, we're going to talk about Firefox. Firefox is a product of Mozilla. And something interesting about Mozilla is that, and with Firefox in particular, the way that Mozilla makes money from Firefox is via getting paid by Google to make Google the default search engine in the Firefox browser. So that's kind of interesting. That's a weird incentive for them, right? Because they're supposedly the competitor, the more private version, and that's how they market themselves. But at the same time, they're getting paid by this $1 trillion corporation who's got basically a monopoly on the browser market to have a token competitor. And if it sounds like I'm implying some sort of conspiracy, I think that might be the case. Google was charged with, I think it's called, the antitrust case that they were a part of. It was sort of like what Microsoft went through. But basically, the government said, you have a monopoly on the browser market, and that's not good. And I think what Google does is they pay Mozilla a fair amount of money. Like we're talking tens or hundreds of millions of dollars here, in order to have this token competition to be able to say, oh no, we're not the monopoly. There's competition. Look at Mozilla, look at Safari, right? So I think if it weren't for Google giving them that money as part of their strategy, I don't think Firefox would still exist, just competing in the market based on how few people use it. That being said, I use it. I think it's great. I hope that we continue to have a competitor, even if they're like a controlled opposition, because I think it's healthier for the web ecosystem to have more than just one main browser. And if people are building on different technologies like Firefox's technology, in addition to Google Chromium and Apple Safari, I think it's just a healthier market for the web in general.
Yeah, sure. I think that all makes sense. It was funny. I remember in like the early 2000s, man, like Firefox was like so cool. Like remember just feeling like a total badass. Like, oh look, this school computer doesn't have Firefox installed. Let me take care of that shit. Um, and then download Firefox and install it. It's like, yeah, I just made this computer better. Um, and Because Firefox was actually faster in those days. It was actually was faster and more performant than like IE6 and this before Edge or back when it was all Internet Explorer. And so it felt really cool. And that was actually at that time that was the big draw because we weren't as worried about privacy and the data collection stuff back then. And then eventually they kind of got this privacy narrative or whatever. But I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, because I think, for anyone who's not aware, this all came out of the Netscape. This was after Netscape collapsed. A lot of that source code went over to Mozilla, as I understand that. So it's an interesting piece of internet history. I don't know if I'm as bullish on it long term because I just I don't know. I guess I haven't like really seriously been a Firefox user in a bit here, but I just felt like they could never compete with Chromium in terms of the speed and all that of the browser. And like definitely it's great to me that we have I put more faith and more I shouldn't say faith, but I guess I'm more excited about Brave as like a Chromium fork and all of that because like I feel like they're actually trying to have like a business model that's like they're having not only a de-Googled browser but also a de-Googled business model. And I kind of feel like if it's all open source, it's like I don't know if it's a bad idea if we all converge on the same code base. Like if V8 and whatever the rendering engine was called. And those are all,
Like,
better. Blink, yeah, sorry. Blink and V8 are better and faster and more performant. It makes sense for people to just use that code base. So I think I'm personally more interested in a project that's trying to use Blink and V8 and just kind of like maintain that, but build products that are de-Googled. But I don't know. I'm digressing a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's good that there's somebody else trying something out there.
yeah. On that topic, okay, I want to finish out Firefox here, but I do want to make a quick detour because this is relevant to what we were just
Yeah.
talking about. Go ahead and open up a new tab to ladybird.org. Ladybird is a new browser that is not ready for public release yet. It's still in very much like alpha stage, but it's being built from the ground up by a disillusioned tech guy, and it is completely independent of any large corporation, and it's fully open source and privacy friendly and all that stuff. I listened to a interview with the creator of it, and it sounds very promising. It'll be good to have another player in the browser space that's actually viable. Right now, I think they said maybe in late 2025, it might be ready for beta, but it's not ready yet. However, I'm going to be keeping an eye on it, and I will report back on the Sovereign Computing Show with any updates I have on it. And if I try it out when it is available, I'll let you know how it goes.
Wow, this is looking pretty promising. That's interesting.
So let's go back to Firefox, and I want to talk about some extensions that are really useful. First, for Firefox and really for any browser, uBlock Origin is the gold standard in ad blocking and tracker blocking. Brave actually comes with their own version of this built in, as far as I can tell, they just took uBlock Origin and bundled it with their browser. So you don't have to install it on Brave. But on any other browser, I highly recommend it. To me, I can't use a browser without it. Like that, the internet is just, the web is just unusable to me without it because of how ad-ridden it is, basically. And this will even block YouTube ads. So if you are watching YouTube with this extension enabled, you will no longer see YouTube ads, which is pretty sweet. Here's another reason you'll want to stay away from Chrome is that Google nerfed all of the extensions in the web store. They're basically blocking the functionality of extensions that contradicts their business model of tracking and ads. And you can see this section right here that Steven has up on the screen, which says, this is ublockorigin.com. And they are explaining to everybody about Manifest v3, which is something Google pushed last year, I believe, or in the last year or so. And they basically said all of the extensions that are using this Manifest v2 API, we're going to stop allowing, and we're going to enforce Manifest v3 API. And what that means is just it takes away a lot of the power that extensions have. And the upshot of it is that for uBlock Origin, it reduces their ability to block ads. So if you are on Chrome and you're using uBlock Origin, it's not going to be working nearly as well as it was before. You can ditch Chrome though, and you can use it on Firefox, which still works 100%. And you can, and as far as I can tell, Brave put out a statement saying that their ad blocking will work as well 100%. And furthermore, Brave is not using Manifest v3. They're sticking with Manifest v2, which was the previous version that had more power allowed via the API to the extensions.
Interesting. I'll need to dig into Manifest v3 because I know like they made overhauled the extensions a lot, and I know you can now build like extensions that like come out in like little side sheets instead of little pop-out windows. But I wonder if that has something to do with Manifest v3. Anyways,
and you can see down
Okay.
here the uBlock Origin site says alternatives and solutions. 1, continue using uBlock Origin on Firefox, because it's still full powered on Firefox. 2, use uBlock Origin Lite on Chrome, which is, as it sounds, kind of a more lightweight version in terms of having less capabilities. 3, switch to browsers committed to Manifest v2 support. That would include Brave. I'm not sure which other ones off the top of my head. And then 4, explore other content blocking methods.
Got it.
All right, the next extension I want to talk about is called X Browser Sync. And we're going to pull that up for those of you viewing. And what I love about this one is right now, the way that a lot of browsers encourage you to sync all of your bookmarks and stuff is by signing into their specific account. So Brave has Brave Sync, Firefox has Firefox Sync, Google Chrome has its own Google account syncing system, which none of them are compatible with each other. And depending on how much you trust these companies, which for Google should not be a lot, they are going to be using your data for ways that you might not want. So enter this extension, X Browser Sync. This is, the X stands for cross, so it's cross compatible across different browsers, and it works on any browser that allows extensions. So that would be Chrome, Firefox, Brave, etc. And it's a very basic app. It does one thing, and it does one thing well, and that is that it syncs your bookmarks. And so I've been using this for years. It's just something that kind of fades into the background. I don't really think about it, and it syncs all of my bookmarks. They do have an Android app as well, and unfortunately, they stopped supporting their iOS app. You could see we're on xbrowsersync.org, and in the FAQ section, they say, what happened to the X Browser Sync iOS app? Unfortunately, we had to pull the iOS app due to the inability to continue supporting continuous breaking iOS updates from Apple. Not only was this impractical from the goal of having a shared X-Browser sync codebase for all platforms, but it also meant having to purchase newer Apple hardware to develop on, as well as paying $99 a year for an Apple developer license. Combined with Apple's extremely stringent App Store submission review process, we couldn't justify the iOS app holding up new releases for the other platforms. So the hard decision was taking to pull iOS support completely. We apologize to all Apple users who want to continue using X-Browser Sync and ask those users to consider moving to Android, which is far more developer friendly, as well as providing many other benefits over the Apple ecosystem. And it does suck for people who are on iOS that they can't use that, but I do echo the sentiment here, which is consider using a more sovereign operating system on your mobile devices. And unfortunately, Apple is just too locked down for that. So there's going to be a lot of instances where we're going to talk about various open ways of loading apps onto phones. And the big one is how iOS doesn't allow side loading of apps. And in another episode, we're going to talk about mobile operating systems, and we'll go into this in more detail, but I'm just kind of giving you a teaser here and encouraging you to consider getting a secondary device and loading up a de-Googled version of Android on that, like Graphene OS or Calyx OS. But more to come on that topic. Okay.
Wait,
Anything you wanted to add, Stephen?
not really. I look forward to trying that sometime, maybe on the desktop.
One last thing on X-Browser Sync is that it is self-hostable. You can host your own syncing server, although it does use client-side encryption. So unless you are particularly enthusiastic about self-hosting, you can just use one of the default servers.
Nice.
While we are on the topic of this extension, I've decided we should go to the mobile browsers now. Maybe we can talk about, we've already covered how on iOS, you don't have much choice. If you download Brave or Firefox, it's just a skin over Safari. However, and here's something that I realize now I need to do more research on, and maybe Stephen, you have some input here. But if you download Brave on iOS, do you at least get the ad blocking that's built into Brave or no?
I'm pretty sure you do. Let me verify that by pulling out Brave on my phone right now.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, I can still click on the lion icon, and it comes up. It says, Brave shields are up, 14 ads, and other creepy things blocked. So
Nice.
yeah, you still get all that.
Okay, great. So even though it's mostly Safari under the hood, it sounds like you still get the benefit of ad blocking out of the box. So I would say Brave is probably a good choice on iOS. I'm not sure how much ad blocking and tracker blocking Safari has out of the box. I'm sure they have some, but I don't think it's as robust as uBlock Origin, which is what Brave is essentially using. The other option on mobile is Firefox, and I don't think there's a reason to be using it on iOS, but on Android, I do like using Firefox, and the reason is they are the only mobile browser, as far as I know, that lets you use extensions. So Brave on Android, for example, does not have the ability to install extensions the way you can on Brave on desktop. However, with Firefox, they do have a select number of extensions that you can install. Again, it's not the full suite. I guess when you are developing an extension, you have to specifically target a mobile browser, but they do have some of the big ones. So for example, they have uBlock Origin, and they have Decentralize, which is one that I neglected to talk about earlier. But decentralize, which is spelled like decentral, EYES, that is one that gives you a lot more privacy when you're viewing sites such as YouTube and other content delivery sites. The last extension I want to talk about is a password manager extension. So for example, if I'm using the Bitwarden password manager, I'm absolutely going to install that on all my browsers. It's a must have. It just makes navigating a breeze and allows me to store all of my important data in my password manager. And I'm sure all the major password managers have extensions. I know, for example, LastPass has one, though I wouldn't recommend them. 1Password is great. Any that you can think of, Steven, that you would recommend?
Yeah, Proton Pass is also a good password manager. It's part of the whole Proton ecosystem. Of course, simple login, of course. I mean, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously, once you get out of the Chromium ecosystem, you lose the ability to use like Albi and stuff like that for Lightning payments, unless they have a Firefox extension now. I don't think they do. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Everybody's got their favorite extensions, and I probably don't have a whole ton to add there.
Okay. Let's go back to talking about search engines. You covered Brave Search. Another one that many people might have heard of is DuckDuckGo. This is another privacy-centric search engine. And interestingly, they also have a browser. I don't have a lot of experience with the DuckDuckGo browser. I've played with it briefly, but I'm not really sure I see a attraction for, or rather, I don't really see a benefit for it that would draw me away from using Brave and Firefox. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've never used it, and I don't actually know like what it is. Like, is it a fork of Chromium or a fork of Firefox? I don't know. Um, and yeah, I really don't know. I think it's just this might be a good time to bring up like, well, why are we talking about search engines and browsers in the same episode? And it's like, because we kind of debated if this was, if this should be separate topics or the same. And what we've really seen over the past 30 plus years is just that the search engine and the browser have kind of become really intertwined. And for a lot of people, they're actually, I think they've kind of become inseparable ideas. Like, it used to be you're on your browser and you actually had to type in yahoo.com or altavista.com or google.com. And then the next stage was having the browser homepage default to a search engine, like Firefox, like having Google on the homepage. And then the next stage was kind of like, oh, get the Google toolbar for Internet Explorer, right? Then Chromium came out, and they're just like, we're just going to we're going to turn it into a unified search bar at the top. It's like, you can type in a website or you can type in a search term and we'll know what you mean. And ever since that happened, every other browser has adopted that same design pattern. Firefox and Edge, they're all that now. And so now for like most people, I don't even know if most people even understand the difference. I actually wonder if most regular folks actually even understand what a search engine is, because it is so tightly bundled into the web browser. And so I kind of wonder with the DuckDuckGo thing, if this was like part of that, like realizing, because obviously as a search engine, instead of selling data, DuckDuckGo sells advertising the way that Google used to, but their advertising is not targeted towards you individually. Their advertising is targeted towards whatever search term you're searching for, right? So it may be that they're just kind of like, okay, the browser and the search engine have become inseparable in most people's minds. So we need to offer an end-to-end solution, browser, search engine, to get more people to use our service to sell more ads. Maybe that was part of the thing. But anyways, that's why we are where we're at, talking about search engines and browsers in the same episode because they're technically different, but they're for better or for worse, they're bundled as a single unified product for most consumers these days.
And you've reminded me of some conversations I've had with non-technical people, and you're exactly correct, because I would ask them something like, what browser are you using or what search engine are you using? And either way, the answer would be Google. They didn't really have the distinction like you mentioned. For them, there's a search bar on their phone, and they just type in something and then search results come back. It's totally transparent to them. And I don't even think they understand the concept of having different browsers and different search engines that may or may not be coupled with those browsers.
Yeah, man, I can't. How can you live like that? Anyways,
two more search engines I want to cover that aren't coupled with a browser. First is StartPage.com. StartPage is a good option if you only want Google results. Let's say you're used to Google results, or let's say you specifically need the same results you would get from Google, but you want some privacy. StartPage is like a proxy between you and Google. They just hit Google servers for you, but they're not passing your data on to them. So if you want Google results, but without the Google surveillance, try StartPage.com.
yeah, and on that note, real quick, it's like, maybe I shouldn't need to say this, but obviously if your privacy is important, don't go to StartPage and be like, restaurants near my home address. Like, if you type in restaurants near and then you put in your home address, you've kind of, identified probably who you are to somebody somewhere along the line. But having said that, assuming you're searching for something that has a high enough anonymity set, then yes, you have greater privacy.
Sure. And I would say even in the case where you're searching an area that would dox your approximate location, at least it's not passing on your IP address and browser fingerprinting and those kind of things. So you're still getting some benefits there. And this is a point that I want to hit on, and I will continue to hit on over the course of this show, which is you want to have multiple layers, sort of a defense in depth approach to your privacy. You don't want to rely on any one tool. For example, just using a VPN, but not changing any of your other behaviors or tools is not going to give you a lot of privacy. You're still going to leak your identity via other means. But if you have multiple tools and private approaches, they're all going to add up, and where one might leak data, the other might cover that hole, and vice versa. So that's why you'll use a variety of tools to build up a nice sovereign computing toolbox.
Yep.
The last search engine we're going to look at is called Kagi. I think I'm saying that right. Kagi. Let's see if we can.
.com?
I don't know the domain name.
Well, let's just, to be safe, search for Kagi. Search. Kagi.com. Okay.
Yeah.
Kagi.
So this one, Kagi is a newer search engine, and they market themselves as a private search, but they actually you can buy a premium account for a price, and they've got some premium features. I haven't tried the paid account version, but supposedly it's got some great algorithms and great results, and it's a good experience. So if you like the idea of paying for a search engine so that you're not paying with your data, then Kagi seems like an up and comer. So I just wanted to give them a quick mention.
Never heard of them. That's cool.
Any other comments or things you would like to talk about regarding search engines, browsers, or extensions, Stephen?
Not that I can think of.
All right, let's move on to our boost section. And before we read the boosts for this episode, I would like to shout out to all of the listeners that were streaming in last time. And you guys are really appreciated. all of your sats. If you want to boost in, you can do so with Fountain, the Fountain app, or go to fountain.fm and search for the ATL BitLab podcast. If you're listening to this, you probably already know how to find it. But as of right now, Fountain is the easiest way for the easiest podcasting 2.0 app to use. However, there are some others that I want to talk about, but we won't go into too much detail here, maybe another episode. But Podverse is one and Breeze is another. Both of these have the ability to listen to podcasts and stream sats as well as send in boosts. All right, we are now going to read our boosts. So let's go ahead and pull that up.
Yeah, it should be. I think it's just this one this week.
All right, we have a boost from Live Long and Prosper for 100 sats. And Live Long and Prosper says, "Hey, good job." Thank you, Live Long and Prosper. Your sats are much appreciated, and we hope you keep listening.
Yeah, ditto on that. All right, cool. Yeah. That's
all right,
the boost.
And that's all the boosts for today. I want to remind everyone that you can go to atlbitlab.com/podcast, and you can see all of the episodes there. You can donate to the show, you can boost in, and you can get all of the show notes and the video. If you like watching the video of it, we have all of the screencasts recording as we are talking. That's all for today. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about anything that we discussed, you can look for links in the show notes. That should be in your podcast player, or you can go to atlbitlab.com/podcast. On a final note, if you found this information useful and you want to help support us, you can always send us a tip in Bitcoin. Your support really helps it so that we can keep bringing you content like this. All right, catch you later.